All right, welcome back, everybody. It is 2:45. This is the Commission's business session, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. First item is committee consent around the approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda or anything on the new business that anybody would like to bring forward? Seeing no hands, we will consider the agenda approved by consent. Moving on to the approval of proceedings from the October 2020 meeting. It's been some time since the business session has met. The proceedings, I was just reminded, is when we approved the annual action plan. Any questions or comments around the approval of proceedings? Or any objections to approving those? Seeing no hands, the approval of proceedings from the October 2020 meeting have been approved by consent. Is there any member of the public who has a comment on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, we will move right along. The next item is to consider the approval of the Bluefish allocation and rebuilding amendment. This is a final action, and I believe Dustin Learning is going to lead us through this conversation.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to get my screen going. Just checking, you should see the opening title screen. Is that what everyone's seeing?
Got it, Dustin.
There you go.
Perfect. All right. So as the chair indicated, I'll be covering the Bluefish allocation and rebuilding amendment. So in June, the Bluefish board met jointly with the council and approved preferred alternatives for the Bluefish allocation and rebuilding amendment. And if approved by the commission today and by NOAA Fisheries at a later date, this amendment would be implemented for management for the 2022 fishing year. So there are a number of different management issues that were addressed through this amendment, starting with the Bluefish FMP goals and objectives. These revise the objectives that were put in place through Amendment 1 that have been in place since 2000. And so Goal 1 is to conserve the bluefish resource through stakeholder engagement to maintain sustainable recreational fishing and commercial harvest. This goal is then supplemented and aided by 5 different objectives. I won't read them all here, but I can easily flip back to these if there are any questions about any one objective. The second goal is to provide fair and equitable access to the fishery across all user groups throughout the management unit. And again, we have 3 objectives aiding in that goal. Then perhaps the most influential management issue of this amendment is the rebuilding plan. And the board and council selected the constant fishing mortality approach. This would rebuild the stock within 7 years. And an important thing to know here is that the rebuilding projections will be rerun every 2 years, coinciding with the specifications process and each of the management track stock assessments that are happening biannually. So it'll be an iterative process, and the actual catch advice will change each time it's rerun. Another issue was the commercial recreational sector allocations. Amendment 1 had previously established 83% recreational and 17% commercial allocations of the acceptable biological catch, or ABC. And the board and council selected to revise these allocations to 86% recreational and 14% commercial. And this was based on 1981 to 2018 catch data. And again, catch data is landings and discard estimates. There are also changes to the commercial state allocations. The amendment allocates a baseline quota of 0.1% to each state, and then allocates the rest of the commercial quota based on landings data from 2009 to 2018. The board and council decided to phase in these allocation changes over 7 years in order to reduce short-term economic impacts to the affected commercial fishing industry. So up here, we have the table with the previous allocations under Amendment 1, and then on the right, we have the allocations that they will be in 7 years, and then the difference between the two is phased in incrementally each year through the 7-year phase-in. There was also changes to the sector transfer process. Amendment 1 only allowed sector transfers, the transfer of quota from the recreational sector to the commercial sector. And transfers were capped at a 10.5 million pound cap. And now, through this new amendment, the sector transfer process has been updated to allow for transfers in either direction between sectors. And the cap has also been updated so that now it is capped at 10% of the acceptable biological catch. And this has the added benefit of scaling up or down with biomass coming out from the most recent stock assessment. The last issue that was addressed through this amendment was management uncertainty. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar or just a refresh, management uncertainty is a tool that is used or can be used by the board and council to address anything that is uncertain in terms of its impact that management would like to address through a buffer. You can reduce essentially the total allowable landings now for either sector by a certain set amount, which comes in the form of a reduction between the total allowable landings and the recreational harvest limit or the commercial quota. In previous versions of the plan, this was a management uncertainty tool that could be just applied overall to the fishery, and it would impact both sectors, regardless of where the management uncertainty first resided. But now it can be applied, as shown in this flowchart, to either sector individually. And so with that, I'll just take any questions. I'm happy to go back anything over in particular, and I'll bring it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dustin. Any questions or comments from the management committee or the business committee? Excuse me. Not seeing any hands. This is a final action. Are there any objections? Well, I guess let me ask Tony or Bob, do you need any additional clarity for the motion, or can we just go through the process of asking if there are any objections?
I think maybe we should have a motion, and the chair of the Bluefish Board has one prepared. Chris Savage.
Great. Chris, I'll call on you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I move on behalf of the Bluefish Management Board the approval of the Bluefish Allocation and Rebuilding Amendment to the Bluefish Interstate Fishery Management Plan 2. The effective date of the FMP modifications would be consistent with the effective date published in the final rule in the Federal Register.
Great. We have a motion by Chris Savage. Do we have a second? Maureen Davidson is seconding. Would you like to give any further justification, either the maker of the motion or the seconder? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the Bluefish Board and the council for their hard work on this plan. There was a lot of issues, as Dustin covered, and I think we really updated our management plan for bluefish, not only to rebuild the stock, but also to align the allocations and update the sector transfers and goals and objectives compared to what was in place for the last 20 years. And I also want to thank Dustin and Matt Seeley with the council, as well as the rest of the FMAT, for all of their hard work in developing this amendment. They had a short time period to do this, especially with the with the rebuilding plan that needed to be in place next year. So just wanted to express my gratitude to those groups.
Great, thank you very much for that. Is there any comments or questions on the motion? Tom Foti.
I guess you knew I was going to say something on the Bluefish Management Plan. I know there's a lot of hard work with all the good intentions in the world and everybody thinking, you know, how we could do this. But truthfully, this is I think another plan where we basically put numbers and charts and tables and say that we're going to accomplish something in a number of years. And I think we have no control of what's going to happen with bluefish. Unlike some species, it was not because of the harvest of both commercial or the recreational sector that caused the problem. It's all environmental causes. And since we can't do fix the environmental causes that caused the problem, or the reallocation of the fish further offshore, we're just basically thinking that we're going to do something by managing by numbers and quotas. So I have real problem voting on, after all these years, I'm really having a hard time now voting on plans which I have no confidence will accomplish what we do. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thanks, Tom. Let's see, Cynthia Farino.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a point of clarification on the motion as it stands. I was just wondering why this is referred to as the Bluefish Interstate Fishery Management Plan 2. Is that on purpose or intentional? Or is it just something that I've missed?
Cynthia, that's how it was labeled in the motion that was approved at the council meeting, and so that's why I kept it in.
I think that's in reference to the fact that it's Amendment 2 to the Bluefish FMP, but if that is redundant or not necessary, we can definitely change the motion.
Well, just further clarification, it's actually Amendment 7 on the council plan, unless it's Amendment 2 to the commission's plan. But that's all. Thanks.
Tony, do we need to make any clarifications there, or if it's consistent with the council side, are we okay? Seems like we'd be okay.
Two shakes. I'm just making sure we're at Amendment 2.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Amendment 2 for the commission, Cynthia. We only
Okay,
have one.
Yep, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify and double check and make sure that we're doing this correctly for the record. Thanks.
Thanks,
Great,
Cynthia.
thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments on the motion? I'm going to read back into the record the motion and then ask for objections. Move on behalf of the Bluefish Management Board the approval of the Bluefish Allocation and Rebuilding Amendment to the Bluefish Interstate Fisheries Management Plan 2. The effective date of the FMP modifications would be consistent with the effective date published in the final rule in the Federal Register. It was a motion by Chris Bat-Savage and seconded by Ms. Davidson. Are there any objections to this motion? I have no objections. Are the services abstaining or are they not objecting?
They don't have a vote.
I'm hearing no objections, so the motion passes without objection. So thank you very much for that work. Thank you, Dustin, for the presentation. Moving on, we normally would then have consideration of non-compliance, which we do not have any. And since there is no, I'll give a last call for any additional business. No additional business being brought before the business session. That concludes our work for our summer commission meeting. I want to thank everybody. A lot of ground was covered this week. A few tough issues that had to be wrestled with. I think we continue to end up in a good spot with the Commission's work. I want to thank everybody for their time and attention to these important matters. And with that, I am going to conclude our business here today and for the week and call the meeting. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.